We're talking today with Bernie DePrimo of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, Bernie, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
Okay, I was born in Pennsylvania, Jefferson County. I lived there just 2 years, and then we moved to Detroit because the mines went down. My dad had worked in a mine. In fact, his dad was killed in a mine accident. My dad started there when he was 9 years old. But then, so the crowds scattered all over the eastern side of this country, as far as Detroit, Chicago, Rochester, New York.
Now, what year were you born?
1924.
Okay. Okay, and so 2 years later you moved to Detroit.
Moved to Detroit, yeah. And I went to school, Blessed Sacrament Catholic School, for 8 years, and then Detroit Catholic Central for 4 more.
Okay.
Graduated in 1942.
Okay. Now, what was your father doing for a living in Detroit?
I think he worked for Cadillac for a year or so, and then he worked at the United States Railroad for the rest of his career.
Okay.
Retired sometime in the 60s, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did he have steady work then through the 30s?
He did, yeah. Even the Depression, he didn't have any time off then.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many kids were in your family?
Just me and my sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And you managed to, so you were able to go through high school. You graduated in 42. Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I do. A friend of mine, his dad was city editor of the news, and we were over there just listening to a football game, and he called up and told us. That's how we knew about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, how did that affect things over the next year or so?
Really, it didn't affect very much. We were, we had friends in Mackinac City during the summer, and we'd go up there and had a lot of fun playing around up there. And summer of 41 was big, and then we had a lot of fun in 42.
Of course, the summer of 41, the war hadn't started yet.
That's
at least
right.
Not in the U.S.
Yeah, right. So we then in the fall, after I graduated in 42, just waited and started at the University of Detroit. I had 1 semester there, and about 1 month into the second semester, I was drafted. So
Okay.
that did it.
So you get your draft notice early in 43.
43.
Yeah. So like a year after the start of the war. All right. And when did you actually have to report for service?
March 2nd, we went down and were examined physically and all, and then they gave us a week furlough, and so we turned up at the following Monday. It was 9th, and went to Fort Custer, and we took the tests, whatever they call it, general tests, and they gave us all our equipment, etc. And in about 3 days, we hopped on a train and went to North Carolina.
Okay.
To Fort Davis, or Camp Davis, and then we went through we didn't go through a normal
Basic training?
basic training. We went right to, this was an outfit, the 430th had been, up until this time, they'd been a training outfit. They trained people in the aircraft and then shipped them out to anti-aircraft outfits. But at this point, they turned them into a regular anti-aircraft outfit. But we took basic training with them as well as training in the anti-aircraft business, people on the guns and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Now, did you have a sense that they had, before you got there, that they had a lot of guys just doing general basic training, or would anyone going to that camp be going there for anti-aircraft?
They went in for anti-aircraft, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So did you have a stretch there at the beginning where you were getting a lot of the basic training stuff, like marching and?
Yeah, oh, we did it all. We did it under there. We were quarantined for 6 weeks or something like that. We did the exercises, and we marched, and we did 15-mile and 25-mile and the whole works, you know.
Now, what part of the state was this in?
Well, way in the east. In fact, Fort Fisher was right on the water.
Okay.
And we went down there. I think we probably spent a month down there, learning how to shoot the guns and all that kind of stuff, you know, because did it out over the water.
Okay. All right. So you're not too far from Wilmington then? Would that
Oh
be?
no, I spent Easter in Wilmington that
Okay.
year.
Yeah, because Fort Fisher was one of the Civil War era forts that guarded Wilmington.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, I slipped on a ping pong table at the USO in Fort Wilmington. They didn't have any places to sleep.
Okay. Now, when you were doing those first 6 weeks, how much emphasis did they put on discipline and following orders?
Oh, quite a bit, yeah. But our cadre that was there, they had been training people. They trained us, but they were our officers. They were sergeants and so on like that. So they were mostly East Coast people, Boston, Baltimore, places like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some experience. I was told that the first platoon sergeant, staff sergeant, was the guy that wrote the book on 50 caliber machine guns.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd been in a while, and we got along very well with them.
Okay. So what was it like? I mean, you had the guys who were training you are going to be your sergeants and your officers. How well? I mean, did they treat you fairly? Do you think when they were training you, or were they really hard on you?
No, I don't think they were hard. I wasn't in a gun crew. I was in communications, and our communications sergeant was a regular. He'd been in 12 years before the war and all that kind of stuff. So but he wasn't. He didn't hold to the strict. In fact, one time we were, two times. One day we were learning how to splice wire, and we were practicing wheeling it off the things they were on. We stood there for a while. We sat there, we worked there for a while. And he said, "Well, that's enough." He says, we'll just take off. He says, "There's a nice place up on the hill. You can get it in the shade."
Mm-hmm.
So we spent the afternoon there. And another time we went out on a CPX, just setting up command posts and stuff like that. It was pouring rain. So after we settled down for the night, we jumped back in our truck, went back to the camp, changed our uniforms, and came back. And then it stopped raining.
All right.
So we had a nice. He was that way. He was good.
Okay.
He knew his way around the Army, that's for sure.
Now, was he doing that with you even when you, in that early stage of training, or did that just come later while you were?
Well, it was in the first 6 weeks.
Okay, yeah.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
All right. Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to life in the Army?
I didn't have any problems. No. It was easy. We had well, as they say, these guys are experienced. They'd been around, and we, for instance, we had a very good mess crew, sergeant, and the cooks had all been cooks or bakers in civil life.
Mm-hmm.
But things like we had, for a while at Camp Davis, we had family style eating. We had crockery.
Mm-hmm.
We'd sit eight at a table and pass big plates of the food, and people find this hard to believe sometimes, but Sunday mornings, a lot of guys would have an overnight pass, so there weren't too many people there for breakfast. So we just line up and go through the kitchen and tell them how we wanted our eggs and stuff like that. It was a little not strict Army routine either, I guess. Yeah.
About how many men do you think were in the whole battalion?
Oh, well, the whole battalion. Well, let's see, the only way I can do it is by battery. There were 8 guns. That'd be about 80 people. And communications had about 6 or 8. And probably a battery was about 100, 110, something like that. So that'd be about 500 in the battalion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there was a headquarters battery too.
Right.
So, yeah, it'd be 100 or 500, so.
Okay. And then which battery were you part of?
C.
Okay. So so C battery has its set of guns, but it
Yeah.
also has a communications people, and you're one of those.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, see, because when you're in battle, if you will, you're spread all over the place. So we had to have communications with headquarters, so we laid the wire to each gun position. And so I was sort of a jack of all trades, actually, because I drove the truck, one of the battery truck, one of the communications trucks, and then later on I did other things. I drove the Red Ball when they made the break to the east, and that lasted a long time. We had a lot of fun there, and since we were a mobile outfit, everybody had to learn how to drive. We all had driver's licenses. So anybody could drive anything, but we had certain assignments.
There were a lot of anti-aircraft units, ones that would just go into fixed positions and stay there.
Yeah.
So so they label yours, your Anti-Aircraft Artillery Battalion, mobile, so that you could move with the units as they were on a campaign.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what so many of these, like that the first couple of days, we moved maybe 2 or 3 times in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So we get our stuff lined up there, a little laid out, and we have to pick it up again. So,
Okay. Now, how long did you spend in North Carolina?
well, let's see, we went there in March, and we got a 11-day furlough in late August, and we left. We were at Fort Fisher. Actually, most of the time, after the 6 weeks, we were there at Fisher most of the time. Mm-hmm. And then we went back to Davis for a while, and then furlough, and then we went up to Fort Devens in Massachusetts, which was fun because they didn't have any room for us at a port of embarkation, so we stayed at Devens for 3 weeks. It was beautiful, old fort. Mm-hmm. Brick buildings and all. One problem we had that they had, and the building we were assigned to, at least our battery was, was, had been formerly a WAC barracks, so we didn't have any urinals. Had a number of toilets, we had to wait in line. That was,
Now, while you were in North Carolina, you mentioned being in Wilmington and staying in the USO once. Did you get off base much?
after 6 weeks we did,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what was there to do around there?
Very little. One time, we played golf at, of course it has been on the tour lately. Yeah, I don't remember the name of it now, but one of my buddies I met from Green Bay, he had been city champ before he was 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were 3 or 4 of us played, I think we played 9 holes. Other time we went to a town, what was the name of it? It was near Fort Bragg, I think. But, we had a great chicken dinner there, I remember that. We travel around, they had, buses running and things like that.
Okay.
And one time we were well, this was after, no, it was while we were still at Fort Fisher. We had a 3-day pass. This buddy of mine we went to Washington DC for 3 days. And we had a lot of time off. Actually, I told my grandson-in-law that he was so surprised because we got only a half day on Saturday and we had Sunday off. So we spent most of the time on the beach because we were right on the shore.
Right. Now, while you were down there in North Carolina, did you notice sort of the segregated society and the...
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. It was all black and white. Yeah.
And were you prepared for that, or?
Oh, we knew it. We expected it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're down in North Carolina for a while, then you move up and you went to Fort Devens, and you're going to ship out of Boston then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when did you actually get on the ship then?
Well, we spent a week at Miles Standish. That was a port of embarkation.
Right.
And we got on the ship and sailed on the 22nd of October, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of ship were you on?
It was a British former liner. It was good, nice ship. Well, not a real big one, but we joined the convoy and took us till November 2nd to get to.
Okay.
We landed at Cardiff, but went right up into near Liverpool in England.
Okay. Now, on the trip over, what was the weather like?
We had one bad storm, and we were where we were stationed around the stern. We later found that was where they had a gun and they had ammunition all around us too.
Mm-hmm.
But the storm got bad enough that we'd go up and down, and the stern would be out of the water, and that the
Propellers?
rudder, yeah, it would just shudder. Just
Mm-hmm.
the thing would shake, and then it hit the water, and then do up again, and it kept us awake a little bit. Yeah. We didn't do much on the ship. I know a lot of guys played poker and stuff, stuff like that.
Now, did a lot of guys get seasick?
Now and then, yeah, there were a few. I was lucky I didn't.
Right. And did you have any U-boat scares while you were going across?
No. We had a big convoy and didn't get any alerts there.
Mm-hmm. At that point in the war, the U-boats were not as dangerous as they used to be.
Yeah.
We had better escorts and that kind of thing, but it was still possible. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, but you took, I mean, that was probably what they would have called a fast convoy if you went in 10 or 11 days rather than
Oh,
3 weeks or something
yeah,
like that.
Yeah.
Now, were you zigzagging though as you went?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you landed Cardiff, and then they move you off pretty quickly, and you go up to Liverpool, that area. What do you do from there?
Well, we got all our equipment there. We were at a little British camp right outside of Liverpool, a town of Huyton, Huyton. And there was, there was pubs there and stuff like that, but we went to Liverpool when we had a chance. But they shipped all our equipment over. They had to ship the guns, and it's funny, they had for each gun they had an automatic thing to connect, but they didn't use them in the war. We just used guys sitting, pumping the pedals and things to fire it that way. But we did have places things to electricity.
Well, you used those like direction finder stuff or things like that, or
Yeah, well, that's what we used for. But then we kept those, and so we had them to power our headquarters tents and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So you had generators, but you weren't using them for the guns. You were using them for other things instead.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The first thing we had to do was take all the cosmoline off the 40 millimeters and our rifles and everything. That's where we got our.
Okay. Now, some people, an outside audience, they might not even know what cosmoline is. What was it? And what was it used for?
Well, it was just a grease, a thick grease, protected the guns so they wouldn't rust, I guess, or whatever.
Okay. And then how hard was that to get off?
It was hard to get off. It had to be all clean, so you had to wipe most of it off, and then you'd wash it with gasoline or something like that,
Okay. And now, you're there for what, about 6 months or something close to that?
Let's see.
Were you there until you went across the channel, or did they
No.
move you somewhere else?
Oh, no, we had one actually where we were in position. But we stayed there probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks. No, maybe it wasn't that long. Then we moved to a place halfway between Liverpool and Manchester. It was an air base, Burtonwood Air Place. It was a repair depot.
Mm-hmm.
But we set up our guns all around it, so we were there for a while, and then in I think about March of 43.
Or 44 by then.
44 by then, yeah, that's right. We traveled south. We went to Somerset, city of Yeovil, in Somerset, and we were there till D-Day. We drove out for Southampton, and people came shouting, D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
We suspected something because the whole night there were planes going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, while you were there in England, you were a mobile unit, you guys all have driver's licenses, you have vehicles. Did you drive around in England much?
Oh, yes, we did. We did a lot of doing the same thing we were doing in France. In fact, I would drive our platoon commander out. We'd take the first job. He'd go out and we'd look the place over and where we're going to position the guns, and then the rest of the guys would come along and set them up and all that kind of stuff. So,
How long did it take you to get used to driving on the wrong side of the road?
Well, it wasn't hard because there wasn't much traffic. Yeah, yeah, we got, one of the guys had an accident because he was following a tram or something like that, and the tram turned, and it turned where he wasn't expecting it to turn. He ran into it, but that was about it.
Okay. Now, did you get to do things like go into London at all?
Not till we, yeah, we did, we got, well, theoretically, we weren't supposed to go to London. But they gave us passes to Reading, and so we just stayed on the train and spent the night in London. Yeah.
So was that when you were down in Somerset that
Yeah.
you could do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, Liverpool was an hour and a half or 2 hours. Manchester about the same, so we didn't go to London. But, yeah, we got into London only once, I think. We stayed 1 or 2 nights, bar hopping. we had fun. I guess we must have had a few to drink, because we ran up down
Subway steps, or?
subway steps. Yeah. We would run up the downwards. They were long, you know. They got 2 or 3 levels.
Yeah, some of those.
Yeah. We had fun.
Okay. And while you were in London or in these other cities, could you see evidence of the bombings that had happened there? And
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
and in general, what kind of attitude did the English people seem to have toward you guys?
Well, the English people, as a whole, were pretty friendly. Some of the soldiers didn't get along think too much of us, I guess. But we didn't have any problems, really. No fights that I could recall or anything.
All right. So now you get down, you're taking us sort of on D-Day, you're moving
Southampton.
to Southampton so you can ship across the channel.
Yeah.
All right. And basically just take us through that. D-Day, you go down to Southampton, and then do you camp for a while, or what do you do?
We camped for probably a day, just 2 nights, I guess. And then we loaded up.
And what kind of ship did they put you on now?
I don't know what it was.
It's a transport, but not an LST or something like that.
No, it was a ship. And we got over there on probably D+2 or 3. And then we sat offshore for 3 days. So there was a little bit of activity there, because the Luftwaffe wasn't all that active, but they did come over at night. In fact, some of our gunners went up on deck and used the Navy's Anti Aircraft guns right there.
Mm-hmm.
That was our first touch of action.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when they did unload you, how did they do it? Because we didn't have a port there.
No, they did it over the side.
Okay.
You know, they had cranes to take the trucks, and we went down on a rope thing and jumped into a smaller boat.
Okay. So now they're putting you in landing craft, basically?
Yeah.
Okay. So the kind that are sort of, they have the open top and you just go right in?
Yeah, only how'd that happen? I'm trying to think, because we drove into the water and
Right.
on the shore.
Well, they could do that. There were landing craft, there were an LCM, which would maybe hold 1 or 2
Yeah.
vehicles.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
just one at a time, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they could load you those, and those would come up to the shore, and they open the ramp in the shallow water.
There we were, yeah, right.
Okay. And so, where did you land then?
Omaha.
Okay. And what did Omaha Beach look like on D+5?
It was still a little messy, but there weren't any bodies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of junk, stuff that hadn't been hauled away yet. We went right up to Colville,
Mm-hmm.
which I think now is where the cemetery is.
It's right near there, yeah.
Mhm. So we spent the first night up there.
Okay. And then did you set up the guns there? Did you go somewhere
No,
else?
we went the
Yeah,
first
there you go.
the first day. Let's see, what did it say? Yeah, 12/14. We had Colville, and we had 1, 2, 3, 4 different positions in about 3 days. Like,
Now, when they're moving you around and you're setting up these positions, was it clear that did you have something to protect? Were they setting up airfields or bases? Or
I really don't know.
Okay.
We didn't stay anywhere long enough, you know, we changed sometimes twice a day in different positions.
Okay. Now, your anti-aircraft battery, you'd mentioned already the Luftwaffe was not what it used to be.
Yeah, right.
Now, how much did you actually, how often did you get to shoot at anything?
You know, I can tell we did, I know we did shortly, well, probably within the first within the first week, we had some planes go over. In fact, we shot down a British plane. He was following a Messerschmitt.
Okay.
And he ran right into the flak and no, he broke his leg, so it wasn't too bad.
Okay. And when the Germans showed up, would it be 1 or 2 planes at a time or more of them?
Very few. I don't think that they you know, we really overpowered them as far as air was concerned. We had one experience though that we had a chaplain we were having. He was setting up for mass once this Sunday, and just about the time he was going to start, we heard any aircraft fire, and the stuff was going all over us, you know. Leaves were knocked off trees, branches and so on. But that didn't last long. I don't know whether we got anybody that day or not, but
Okay.
we shot at them.
All right. Well, the first part of the campaign, the Normandy campaign, it takes us a while to get out of Normandy. You were moving around some, but you didn't have really long distances to travel probably until August. Now, so how did you spend most of your time in those first weeks in Europe? Did you just stand at your duty stations?
Just stay there, yeah.
Mhm.
That was about it.
Okay. Now, how much did you see of the French civilians in these places?
Very little. Like, we'd see them now and then. There weren't that many around. I think
Mhm.
they had sort of hidden or kept away from activity, really.
Okay. And were you mostly setting up kind of out in the country in different places, in open ground?
Yeah. Those are
Okay.
mostly all the places like about the first 5 were like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then on the 21st, we moved into Bouzeville, La Bastille, which was a big estate,
Mm-hmm.
and had a chateau on it where we set up the battalion, I think, set up the place there. But
Mhm.
we were out, there was a big long drive up to it. We had our battery headquarters tent on one side of the road and the mess, and we slept in the hedgerows on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And that was about it. We were just kept, that's where we had, I think it was while we were there that one of our guys shot a paratrooper who had come down. or was trying to get away somehow. He stopped.
Yeah, because at that point, the Germans had paratrooper units that were fighting as infantry. But was this guy somebody who jumped out of an airplane?
No,
Or okay,
no.
yeah. But they did have.
He was a paratrooper.
Yeah, there were paratroopers around.
Yeah.
Okay, so had he been caught behind your, away from his men, or
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, he was all by himself.
Okay. Now, how much did you know about what was happening in the campaign while you're there in Normandy? Did you get any kind of news?
Very little.
Okay.
In fact, I always think about it. I had to operate a switchboard now and then, which was in battery headquarters. I saw, a map on the wall, there on the side, and I thought, well, we've got quite a bit of land there. But the scale of those maps is like a quarter mile to an inch or something. So there really wasn't that much land.
Yeah. Now, eventually, we do break out of there. It kind of captured Saint-Lô late in July, and then in August, then we kind of hit the road. And now, how did things change for you once that breakout started?
Well, this place at the Chateau, we stayed there. What was it? About June. We stayed there from June 21st to July 22nd, I guess.
Yep, that'd be about right.
No, it was June 22nd in July. I should get glasses. That's where we had our first experience, Boozeville. We were laying line out to one of the gun crews, and these GIs came up to us and passed and said, "Who are you guys?" We said, "Anti Aircraft." Said, "Well, you're ahead of the line." They were infantry.
All right.
And we went back to the camp that night, just got in there, and there was a couple of rifle shots, and then a couple of 88s came over, but that was, they didn't do any harm.
All right. Because I guess looking at your chronology here, you're at Boozeville until the 12th of July, and then they take you to Saint-Côme-du-Mont, Saint-Marie-du-Mont, and Carentan, which were all kind of in the rear. But then 2nd of August, now you're moving forward again, and you're in Saint-Lô for a while, and then you go on forward.
Yeah.
So you're kind of getting into August, and the breakout happens. Where do you go?
We headed east.
Okay.
I think there was only one place between Saint-Lô and the Loop that we parked. So we were in La Loupe, which was just west of Chartres. On the, I think it was the 22nd of August. We were that far.
So that's and then the question is, are we going to go into Paris or not? And
well, what happened was that that day we stopped in when we parked at La Loupe. All the trucks from all batteries were driven over to a certain place, and they told us that we were going to do something else. We were going to run the Red Ball, because the Red Ball needed as much, all of a sudden there's that long haul to keep the ammunition and all the equipment going. So we, the first night there, we were sent over to the 110th Anti-Aircraft, which was 90 millimeter, because their trucks are already running the Red Bull. So that's how we got to Paris, because the next day we went into Paris, the 24th we took off and went.
So you're basically following the Americans and the French right into Paris there in late August, and you're doing that to keep them supplied.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Red Bull was running from the beach all the way up to Paris. So we did a lot of that.
Okay. And how long did you think you wound up doing that?
Well, it had to be quite some time because we spent, the outfit spent time in Le Bourget Airport,
Mm-hmm.
and we were still doing it then.
All right. Yeah, I guess they're at Le Bourget officially in early September, so for about a week or whatever. And then it looks like now the unit then starts moving again pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And do you rejoin them and move with them now? Or do you stay with the Red Ball longer?
It's hard to say because we did a lot of driving that wasn't Red Bull, but
Okay.
we did other stuff in Belgium, for instance. We had we had some German prisoners, and we drove them to the railroad, and they unloaded stuff off a train, and then we took it
Mm-hmm.
to artillery places or whatever. So I did it. Well, I was away. A lot of us were away from the. A lot of the drivers were away from the outfit.
Mm-hmm.
I rarely saw anybody except when we laid communication line to them. It was very, very rarely saw anybody in the gun battery.
Okay. And so you are getting up into, the unit does go up into Belgium, and eventually they get up around the Dutch and
Mhm.
German frontier too,
Yeah.
pretty quickly, September into October.
Mhm.
All right. Now, when you were doing this driving, would there be a group of trucks from your unit that would stay together, or would they separate you?
We had convoys.
Okay.
We had a lieutenant from headquarters who took care of us, or was supposed to take care of us. But from time to time, at least my driving partner Jiggs was quite a character. He'd been in the Army quite a while too. You can see he'd had staff sergeant stripes at one
Mhm.
time. Now he was a private. And
Oh.
we were sharing the driving in our truck, and right after we had left Paris, or while we were at Lou, we went back for a load. We went for our first load, and we had some truck trouble, so we had to get it fixed and caught up with it. And so we decided we just dump off we had a truckload of communications equipment, so we found a place where they were storing equipment. We emptied our truck there, and then we thought maybe we'd try to go to Paris again. But we couldn't get enough gas, so we stopped at Chartres and came back to the outfit. One time there, right in near the beach, we were driving, or Jiggs was driving. We had an open truck, 50 millimeter on
Mhm.
it. And he was driving, and there was a farmer and his cow walking across the road, alongside the road. And just as we got there, he was going probably 25 miles, 26, 30 miles an hour. That cow decided to cross the road. It got halfway across, so its feet were planted on the left side of our truck, and that truck hit him. And she spun just around and slapped against the side of the truck, shit all over the side. Jiggs had it in his hair even because he was driving. And the Frenchman got all wild and so on and so on. He'd lost his cow and all that, and all of a sudden the cow just got up and walked away.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. And somewhere along the line, we found a bugle, and Jiggs could play a bugle. So we would drive through a French town, I'd be driving, he'd be sitting up on the 50 millimeter, or 50
Caliber.
Machine gun thing, and he'd play about the first 5 or 6 notes of Le Marseillais.
Mhm.
Everybody would cheer. We had a lot of fun, really.
Now, when you're driving around like this and doing all these supply runs, I mean, what would you do for food or places to sleep at night?
We use rations.
Okay.
I mean, K rations, C rations, and we, I can recall once we, or at least in our truck, we had a blowtorch. So we'd make coffee. In fact, I lived on coffee sometimes for 2 or 3 days. We'd set the canteen cups on the, we had running boards there, so
Mhm.
we set it up, then we'd set the blowtorch there, and we'd throw the water and the coffee grounds in there, and then boil it up, and try to drink coffee out of that canteen cup after it's been used, warmed up by a blowtorch. You had to be very careful. But, it got us through anyhow.
Okay. Now, how long did you keep doing this kind of supply driving? Was it into the winter or?
Off and on, all till the end of the war.
Okay.
Because toward the end, we drove through German lines, with our white flag,
Mhm.
and we brought back. We got one time we got a load of American prisoners.
Mhm.
And we drove up to this camp, and Lieutenant or Captain Ryan, whoever, he said, "Now, park here and get those guys in this truck while I go talk to the Germans," because he says, if the Russians get here, we'll have a hell of a time getting those soldiers out of there. So we got them all loaded and got them back. And then we were picking up DP and displaced persons.
Okay. Well, that's at the very end of
That's
the war.
at the end, yeah.
Okay.
So I say this driving went on in various ways all the way through.
Okay. All right. And now, I guess, but in the fall and later fall and into the winter, you're based pretty much along the Dutch-German border, or around Maastricht or those places, or?
Yeah, we went from, well, we were in Heerlen, which is in Holland,
Mm-hmm.
and from there, we had a big Thanksgiving dinner, to everything, the works.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got march order, we went into Germany, and about half our outfit had diarrhea, which was very nice.
So the Thanksgiving dinner wasn't such a good idea after all.
It wasn't such a good idea. Yeah, and then that was when, in Ireland, as I say, I was a jack of all trades. We set up outposts to get up so we could see around, see if there were any planes, any activity, and warning kind of thing.
Mhm.
So, what was I going to say? And we did that in Germany after we got over our diarrhea. This was right around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, was there much real activity in your area, or was things pretty quiet?
Very quiet.
Yeah, because the Battle of the Bulge was going on farther south.
Yeah. Well, we found that out because we were planning on, 4 of us were living in this building. It had been a barber shop. The ground floor was all right, but we could go up on the roof and set up a radio and get our classes going so we could report to everybody. But we even had a Christmas tree already. And about 2 days before Christmas, we got march order. We went to Stolberg in Germany, and we were protecting a 150 millimeter artillery place, and they were firing into the bulge. we stayed in Stolberg for quite a while. Yeah, that's what. There's Christmas. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong place.
Right there.
Mm-hmm.
I've spotted, I see, okay. So it's got you, well, you're in a bunch of places in,
Yeah,
yeah, you're November, Heerlen, yeah, you go to Alsdorf in Germany, you're going 23rd November, 23rd December, and then Stolberg, 23rd December. So, yeah, the 2 days before Christmas, that's exactly it.
yeah.
And then you're there through January into early February.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you start moving again
Yeah,
for varying chunks of time, and you're heading into Germany at that
yeah,
point.
right.
Okay. Now, as you're traveling around these areas in the Netherlands, in Germany, were you seeing a lot of war damage and damaged buildings, or were most things in good shape?
Well, on the whole, yeah, except we also were in Aachen,
Mm-hmm.
and what's the other one? Begins with a J. Jülich.
Mm-hmm.
Jülich and Aachen were a mess.
Yeah.
And they were really slaughtered. I remember one thing. We were in Jülich. It had been raining, and the lights were on in Jülich, the street lights, and it was all just bright and shiny. The road was wet, and it was shiny. Such a strange situation.
But you had the street lights, but the buildings were all flattened, or?
Yeah.
All right. Now, in some of these places, you're staying for several weeks at a time, sometimes, or longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
In those places, would any of the civilians start to show up, or did they stay out of your way, or?
Well, in Heerlen, we really we were far enough back. We went in there, and they had a movie theater. We went to the movies there, and some of the guys met girls and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that was another funny thing. I went to Sunday Mass there, and it was all in Dutch, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But every so often you could hear in the sermon, Amerikaner Soldaten, and the people would sort of look at us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We weren't too popular, even though we'd liberated them, but anyhow. So Stolberg then, yeah, when we were there, the weather was bad.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any aircraft activity, but the firing, the artillery was firing in there.
Mm-hmm.
But one little scary thing was, at least we thought it was scary at the time, that our captain, our battery commander, was in charge of that area, and he was told that if the Germans happened to break that way, we stay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine firing 40 millimeters as tanks.
Yeah. Against infantry, soft vehicles, maybe tanks, not so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you ever see any of the German jet aircraft?
I did later, yeah. In fact, I remember I was at one of the gun positions, and the sergeant, McDonough, he looked up at this plane and he says, he named it, I forget what the shape of it looked like, one of the other planes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh no, it's not that. It's traveling too fast."
Mm-hmm.
That was when we saw that. I had an experience at Maastricht, though. That was something else. We had a little place. I don't know why we were there. We were outside of Maastricht, and I parked my truck, just got out of it, and I was kneeling in front of it for some reason. I'm checking the tires, I guess. And I just happened to look up. Just as I looked up, I saw a V-2 rocket hitting about 300 yards away.
Wow.
Just, I don't know why it got there. I didn't think they were firing V-2s in the war. They were still shooting them at London.
They were shooting them at England. They were shooting them at Antwerp, but it's possible that it fell short.
It went offshore, yeah.
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 Okay. So what? And then but it blew up, right?
It dug a hole about 20 feet deep and just a crater. Yeah.
Okay.
That's where our guys got some Purple Hearts, because they were in a building, and that my buddy Jim Farrell was in there, and he says when that thing blew, the house sort of expanded, and or vice versa, and then glass blew all over the place, and it had a few windows in it. Some of the guys got down on the floor, and they got cut by the glass, so they got Purple Hearts. They got wounded in action.
Okay. Now, did your battalion ever actually have anyone killed in action, or?
We had, our battalion did, yeah. Our battery just had one, and that was early on. It was when we were at Bowesville, and one of the gun, the gun position that we were serving when those did the infantry passed us. They changed that gun position anyhow, and they were in this place, and it was during the day, and this guy was in his hedgerow sleeping, and an 88 went over, exploded in the air, and hit him. He just like that.
Okay.
We had a couple of accidents. We lost 2 guys to machine guns, or Tommy guns, because they forgot to close the slide, and they dropped it or hit it down something, and it hit somebody else. The truck drivers all had Tommy guns.
Now, were there problems that you were ever aware of with just theft off of the trucks, or out of base camps or things like that? Would people steal things from the trucks, or that kind of?
I never had any experience that way, no.
And did people who were driving the trucks, did they ever do any kind of black market stuff or sell things here and there, or?
Nobody I knew of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did you get opportunities to buy things in different places that you wouldn't get otherwise? Maybe food or wine or anything else like that, or souvenirs?
No, can't say that I did.
Okay. So you just did your jobs?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, as it kind of gets into the war, you get into late winter and the spring, we're advancing again, get up to the Rhine River, and then go across. Now, do you remember crossing the Rhine? Okay, and under what circumstances did that happen?
Just normal. They had a pontoon bridge. Bridge number 7, I think it was.
Okay.
And we just drove across.
Okay. And as you're getting beyond the Rhine, the war is kind of coming to an end. At what point do you start running into things like displaced persons, or seeing a lot of German prisoners, or things like that?
We didn't see any that I could think of.
Okay. I get you said you did at the end.
We did at the end, because then Germans were giving up, and we saw German soldiers walking, in uniform, and we saw, as I say, we picked up a lot of DPs and brought them through the line.
And what did those people look like?
They were reasonably, they were shabby, of course, but they didn't look underfed or anything like that.
Do you have any sense of where they were from? I mean, were they from Eastern Europe, or from the Netherlands, or France, or no idea?
I think they were mostly from Eastern Europe.
Mhm. Okay.
No, there was one place where there was some I think they were Russians.
Mhm.
Russian, somehow or other that had gotten captured were in there.
All right. Well, this tape is about up, so we're going to pause right here
Yeah.
and rewind. Now, we were talking about the last few weeks of the war, kind of the very end there, and you were looking at the list of places that your unit passed through, and I was going to ask, are there particular things that happened in those places that you remember?
Well, I remember one. Well, this goes back to the May. Was that May? No. 5th. I don't know what the numbers are. Munchen-Gladbach was
Okay.
a town, a city that had been taken over by 29th Division, I think. And we got the assignment to move them. They were moving out somewhere, so
Mhm.
we went in with them. They had found a place where there was a cache of wine bottles,
Mhm.
full wine
Yeah.
bottles. And they spent most of the night drinking. And then we piled them on the trucks and took them somewhere. I don't remember now. It was somewhere south of Munchen-Gladbach.
Mhm.
That's, I certainly remember that night, although I didn't have a headache or anything. And one of the greatest, very interesting and enjoyable was Grond. It's on a river. I don't remember what river now, but there was a pontoon bridge across it, and it was a kind of a summer resort.
Mhm.
So we set up I guess with our first platoon and headquarters in this resort building. And we got up on the second floor, and it was rooms, and they had white linen
Like tablecloth sheets, yeah, okay.
and feather ticks.
Mm-hmm.
And we just ripped off all our clothes and laid there for the night, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. It was just such a difference, sleeping in a building in a soft bed like that. That was fun.
Now, you had mentioned earlier, too, that you had at one point gone to pick up American POWs and bring them back out, and you were told that, you don't want to have the Russians get here. Now, at that point, were you across the Elbe River? Were you in the area that would be East Germany?
Well, no, that was even before that. But we did. This was on, there's one year, we were in Schleimnitz, as it says, at 1800 hours, and at Barbie in 2000 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That was the time we were in Germany, over the Elm.
Okay, yeah.
We crossed over there, and we didn't do any setting up. We just sat. And then we got the word we better get back over the other side, because that was
Now, did you ever see anything of the Russians?
not a thing.
Okay.
No.
All right. And where were you when the Germans surrendered? And that would have been about the 8th of May or so.
Yeah, Gross Rosenberg, which was, well, it's the next to last place on this. We were there from 22nd of April to 10th of May.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when.
That's where you were when the war ends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you stay on for the first part of the occupation after that, or did they move you back right away?
When on the 10th of May, we left there
Mm-hmm.
and drove down to the city of Schlitz, which is down near Frankfurt on Main.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in houses then. in there. We were in Schlitz for I don't know how long. But that was then, well, we were, no, even before that. When we were in Schlitz, some of us qualified to go home. And since the 430th was staying as part of the occupation army, they were just, we shipped into another outfit. It's either the 203rd or the 207th, I can't think, artillery. And we spent maybe there were 2 or 3 weeks in a little town called Obermerlin, which was outside of Bad Nauheim. And we had a lot of chance to go in Bad Nauheim and sit in the baths there. It was great. And there was a USO thing or whatever, Red Cross, I guess, donuts and that kind of stuff. We still had an assignment because somehow or other they had this place outside of Obermerlin, which had collected all sorts of artillery stuff from 30 caliber and 50 caliber, all sorts of ammunition. It was all collected together. So we had a guard set on that all the time. So people had to do that. But otherwise, it was rather relaxing. That outfit was, well, I guess the war in Japan was still going on, but they were going home, so we were supposed to go home with them, so we stayed there.
Now, when you kind of formed your unit, there was a cadre of people who'd been there a long time, and then there were the new guys who came in to fill out the ranks and so forth. Now, were you getting to go home before some of the sergeants and the officers?
I don't know. I don't know why that. I can't figure that out. Now, you come to mention it. Because the war in Japan was still going on before or after we moved to the 207.
Well, they were letting people out of the military at that point if they'd served long enough and they had enough points. But it would have struck me that some of the guys who'd been in longer would have had more points than you did, and yet you were going to go home and they were staying.
Yeah, looks that way.
Okay. Well, sometimes it has to do with whether or not personnel are essential and can they.
Well, I know.
do
Yeah,
or not.
I know. For instance, that the first platoon sergeant was made a lieutenant, so he stayed. I'm sure of that. Yeah, that's probably the situation.
All right. So when did you now get to go home?
Well, we left, we went to, the outfit moved to, I wish I could pronounce it, but I can't. It's spelled R-A-G-I-M-S, RAM, something like that. Yeah. And then we drove, or they drove, I didn't drive when I was with the 207, but they took their trucks down as far as Lyon, I think it was Lyon. And then they put us on a train, and we went to Arles, which is down near...
It's down on the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean, yeah. And we stayed there for, well, it was before we left Obermerlin that the war ended.
Yeah.
So that's a little.
Now, did you get on a ship in Marseille, or?
Yeah, a ship in Marseille. what'd they call them now? It wasn't a Liberty ship, it was
The
a
Victory ship was the next
Victory
one.
ship, yeah. Yeah. October 12th, Columbus Day, we sailed. I spent most of my time in a bunk. I had a friend who was doing a little KP. I got a lot of ice cream. He'd bring cups of ice cream.
Okay. What was the weather like on the way back?
Good.
Okay.
Very good, yeah. Yeah.
And then where do you land in the U.S.?
Norfolk?
Yeah, it's quite possible. A lot
Yeah,
of
it
things
was
went there. Yeah.
Was Norfolk. We went to Camp Patrick Henry. And we didn't do anything there, just sat around
Mm-hmm.
for a few days, then went up to Indiantown Gap. That's where we were discharged on the 31st of October.
Mm-hmm.
I did do it by holidays. Columbus Day.
Yeah. And Halloween. There you go. Okay. Now, after you got back home, what did you do?
What did I do?
Mm-hmm.
Went back to school. GI Bill.
Okay. So where'd you go to school?
Aquinas.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny, I was looking for a small college. I didn't want to go back to UND. So I had a girlfriend, who lived in Grand Rapids. And I came up here and we visited some people I knew who happened to live right alongside Aquinas.
Mm-hmm.
And I told I was looking for a school. And I checked with, Olivet and Siena Heights and all different
Mm-hmm.
smaller colleges. And they said, well, we got a corner right across the street. So the next day I went over there and checked in and signed, and it was just in time for the second semester, so
Mm-hmm.
I went on there.
All right. And then what kind of career did you go into after that?
Well, I went to Notre Dame grad school, got an MA in philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and I taught philosophy for the rest of my life.
Okay. And where were you teaching?
Well, I taught first at a college down in, it reminded me of Aquinas when I had gone there, because it was brand new. And Benedictine Heights, it was called, run by Benedictine sisters. And it couldn't make it.
Mm-hmm.
That's as they say, the buckle of the Bible Belt down there. I think there's 2% population Catholic in the whole area, not just Oklahoma, but whole Arkansas, Kansas, and
Yeah.
all things. So they didn't make it, so I got a job at Mercy College in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to Aquinas, and then I got a job at JC, and I taught there for 18 years.
So Grand Rapids Junior College at
Yeah.
that point, now community college.
Yeah, it was JC.
All right. Okay. Now to look back on it, how do you think your time in the service affected you, or what did you learn from that experience?
Well, for one thing, I learned I didn't want to be an engineer, as I had been in engineering at UOD. I think I learned to take things a little slowly, and calmly. I grew up, I think, really.
You were teaching college during a whole period of the Vietnam War and anti-war movement and so forth. And how much did you see of that in the places you were? How did it affect things on the campuses?
Not much.
Okay.
I know there were people who were going to Canada and stuff like that, but not enough.
So the schools you were at were not hotbeds of anti-war
No.
activity?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to share your story today.
Well, it's great.
All right.